Hey guys, just a heads up to let you know that I'm going to be co-streaming TennoCon on the 1st of August. That's only a day or two away at the time of recording this. I'll be going live sometime around 3 PM EST, give or take. That'll be sometime around the mid pre-show panels. I'll be giving out a number of goodies, hanging out with you lot in-game, as well as making a highlight reel of the stream with chat included later on. So if you want to be immortalized in my nonsense, keep an eye out. I've put Twitter and Twitch links in the description.
Hey, look, buddy. I'm an engineer. That means I sell.
Way back in 2013, a little frame known as Vauban was released onto the world. Marketed as an engineer-type frame, at the time I was excited to get my grubby little hands all over him like a Rule 34 artist, but then his release date came, and he was boring. Half his kit did nothing, the other half did the exact same thing, and one of those powers was way better at it than the other. So he ended up just being the guy with pastilles and nothing else until many years later. At which point, after a previous rework attempt, D just went fuck it and gave him a tool that plays the game for him like every other good frame has. But I didn't really care how good he was or his viability. The thing that struck me the most was just how little his concept rang true in his design, as he was designated to be the engineer frame. And even today, that issue still rings true. I can't say I look at this guy and think he's ever held a spanner in his life. He strikes me as the kind of person who thinks they can claim to be a tech head because they buy every new iPhone that comes out. This, of course, is still ignoring the fact that even I called him an engineer in my video regarding his rework, but you must understand, my brain work no very goodly. The point is, he doesn't really fit his concept. I understand that a lot of modern games have kind of changed the meaning of what an engineer class is supposed to be, and maybe DE was trying to do something different, but I don't know, Vauban turned out to be more of a juggling sci-fi space clown more than anything. And while I like him now for his own reasons, he still left me on his bed crying and wanting more. Now, entering stage left, Protea. Pablo's most recent brain, baby. Hackysack champion, abider of containing the virus and sufferer of shoulder pain. This frame immediately caught my attention upon her unveiling. What's this? A sentry gun? A dispenser? She's just like that one class from that team-based cartoon cel-shaded first-person shooter. What's the name of it? Oh, Final Combat! Of course, comparing her to those kinds of archetypes is a bit of an oversimplification, and one that I don't think Pablo quite agrees with or even likes for that matter. But let's be real here. When you introduce any kind of character in a game with these two particular kinds of abilities, everyone is going to be pointing at them and saying, "Ha ha, funny dwarf builder, man!" You can't escape it. And to be honest, I do kind of love that character archetype. So even if it's not exactly what Pablo was going for in this frame's character, it's kind of the only reason why I was interested in her at all. Anywho, after playing Protea, I've come to the conclusion that she's a frame. She's not particularly revolutionary, and she's not super weak either. Like, if you're not interested in her concept and are just wondering about her pure, raw effectiveness, the best way I can describe the flavor of her impact to the game would be that of plain white rice. In fact, she's been a pain to make this video for that very reason. She really doesn't shake up a whole lot. But I have noticed one thing about her. She has a number of little itsy-bitsy tiny annoyances that really add up in the end and make me want to rub sandpaper on me unmentionables. Granted, some of these have been patched in her first round of buffs, and hey, some I cover here might be fixed by the time this video comes out because, let's be honest, that's not too unlikely at this point, but a number of them still exist while making this script, so I'll go over them as we progress through. First up is Grenade Fan, a power that Protea probably found while rummaging through the leftovers Vauban threw in the trash bin. Tapping it will throw out some Rave Nades that deal slash procs and gains damage scaling for every tick of damage it lands on a mob. It also doesn't seem to have a cast limit as far as I can tell, and it's also used to charge the explosion effect from her 4. I used to have a gripe regarding this power in that its damage output was absolute ass. Hell, even when spammed. But it's since got its damage doubled, meaning that now its damage is actually passable. You know, instead of making Dan Hibiki look as strong as a god, it's not bad though. It actually more or less plays things like defense for you at lower levels. It'll shred any trash unit in seconds and bite at the ankles of heavies to stunlock them to death. But its damage does start to become quite slow as levels rise. And mind you, this is with a 6 Forma Umbra build with energy conversion. But it all kind of depends on perspective. If you are looking for your main damage tool, this will probably feel disappointing. But as a supplement to her turret, it's really not that bad. And remember, outside of the damage, this is also her only form of crowd control. It's certainly no Flechette Orb, but it's pretty good. And regardless, there's another plus to this ability. As you're no doubt already aware, this power has another function to it. You know how I said before that Protea probably got this power from Vauban's garbage? Well, this other half is like if she also found a winning lottery ticket that he accidentally threw away. Holding down the ability key will throw out some shield satellites. And this is Protea's primary survival tool. And you know, if I'm not mistaken, it's exactly the kind of power that the trained person has been begging for Vauban to have for nearly a decade. Yeah, I mean, look at this thing. It looks like it'd be a perfect fit for Vauban's kit. Such a shame, really. It's quite nice being able to take a hit. And it's effective at any level range? Look at how good it is, Train. Do you want this, Train Man? Train? Hey, do you want this? Train, do you want this? Word of warning, using the satellites effectively requires you to have a pretty big IQ and a lot of know-how. When shiny blue number drops to 0, throw funny balls at feet. Yeah, survival with Protea is hilariously easy. Like, we're talking real Unga Bunga brains over here. The increased shield regeneration rate along with the overshields is pretty nice, but the absolute best thing about it is that it instantly regenerates your shields upon pickup, meaning you get your shield gate back right away. As long as you catch your shield gate period and react to it, you're more or less invincible to direct forms of deeps. Plus, when your shields hit 0 and activate shield gate while you have a satellite on you, the invincibility that is provided to you from the shield gate lasts longer. So it more or less encourages this use case. Yeah, this is a really solid survival tool. Of course, it won't protect you from status effects and the like, but, and I'm sure Vauban agrees with this, it's better to have something than nothing. Right, so I mentioned before that I have a number of little nitpicks with Protea, so where the shit are they? Well, here's one for Grenade Fan. First off, you can't pick up a stronger satellite if you already have one circling you, even if your current satellite's value is weaker. Sure, yeah, you could argue, oh, well, just wait to cast your strong satellites instead of casting the weaker ones, but remember, this is a frame that encourages you to spam your powers. And besides, frames like Wisp with her moats don't have this issue, so why Protea? But like I said, this is a nitpick. The best part of the shield buff is the instant shield gain you get, not the regeneration buff. So to be honest, it really doesn't matter. You still get the shield gate recharge either way. It's something that, I don't know, probably shouldn't be a thing regardless, but I digress. I'm sure this is the last nitpick that I talk about anyways. Now, there's a lie in that last sentence. I'll let you guess where it is. Next up is Blaze Artillery. The ability that Pablo insists is not a turret, but is totally a turret. Because, come on now, it's a fucking turret. But wait, no, it's not a turret, it's an artillery unit. For fuck's sake, you can call it Peacemaker 2 for all I care. It's still a turret in my eyes. And this is also a pretty simple power in design. It plops down a artillery unit, and it automatically blasts some stuff for a few seconds, and I do mean few seconds, while gaining scaling damage per hit. This power has some really weird and confusing things about it at launch, like how its stat screen didn't show you its duration and instead showed you its ammo count? Now, why the shit would you give a power that lasts shorter than me a fucking ammo count? See, I could barely get this damn thing to use all of its shots before it expired unless I was doing something like ESO. Now, thankfully, they fixed that so it no longer has an ammo limit, which is good, because it was definitely going to go on my shit list of nitpicks. Speaking of, its duration is a bit of a controversial topic, and I am more than willing to bet that it's the main reason why Pablo wanted to avoid calling it a turret. Because at base, its duration is a measly 3 seconds, and that duration is not affected by the power's rank. It stays at 3 seconds, and it used to only be 2 seconds. And you know, I think I get why. Pablo probably didn't want this to be a set and forget sort of power. He wanted it to be a more active tool rather than an idle one. You know, one that you're meant to spam. And after all, this is a frame that was given a power that encourages spam. So giving her a long-lasting idle turret wouldn't really mesh well with her concept. But while I do get the idea behind it, come on, 3 seconds! Also, its enemy detection can be quite excrement at times. Like, sometimes I've seen enemies stand right next to it in its line of fire, and it will just turn a blind eye. I'm not entirely unconvinced that there's a hidden chance for enemies to bribe the fucker to not shoot them. It does put out some decent damage though. It also charges her 4 pretty fast if that's your thing. She can have up to 3 turrets out at a time, and when combined with her 1, she has some pretty good deeps. It's just deeps that require a lot of button presses. As for her next power, we have Dispensary. I honestly have no good way to describe this power because it's literally in the name. How Vauban has gotten shown up this badly by a frame who's a big enough dork to play Hackysack is honestly beyond me. Anywho, yeah, I mean, it just kind of spits out goodies. It operates on a drop cycle of health, then ammo, then energy orbs. And this ability, despite its simplicity, is probably the best power to use with her passive, which I'll get into in a moment. But first, another batch of nitpicks. So for one, these ammo packs you see here, they're actually universal. Awesome! Meaning they will even refill your arc gun ammo. Alright, fucking sweet. So because it counts as arc gun ammo, that means it reduces your arc gun cooldown, right?
No.
Yeah. The wiki says otherwise, but the wiki also probably committed 5 war crimes. Again, I must stress, this isn't exactly a big deal since you can just not put your arc gun away, but it's one of those things that make you ask, why does it work this way? I also feel now is a great time to reiterate how horrible of an idea it was to make arc guns a gear item in the first place. You know, I had folk telling me, stop being such a big baby, but no! No!
Yeah, look at me, I'm Canadian. I like being difficult and
Maple syrup, look at what you did! Anyways, another nitpick worth noting is that the dispensary won't drop an item if you haven't picked up a previous instance of said item. See, at first, I figured maybe it would just increase the value of the pickups that are already on the ground at the next cycle, but nah, it does nothing. I'd say it probably has something to do with performance, but I severely doubt that, you know, given how the game already has a system for doing that. If you ask me, I think it's just because Canadians detest convenience. In that same vein, it doesn't just not drop the pickup. The dispensary will also skip over the drop and continue on to the next in the cycle. In short, don't miss the bus if you want some extra blueberries. Now, usually, I don't show my builds, because you can definitely get better builds from literally anyone else. But this is mine, and the reason that I'm showing it to you is because I firmly believe that her most important stat is strength. With enough of it, combined with her passive, you can give the dispensary a really high chance of dropping 2 energy orbs, which is incredibly fucking good, mind you, since you're probably gonna want to run Zenuric abilities in Arcane Energize. It can get to the point where using her 4 to regain energy can often be the inferior choice. You heard me right, the Blueberry Water Fountain can sometimes be more beneficial to your energy pool than the ability that fucking controls time. Speaking of Temporal Anchor, aka the power in which I refuse to make a tracer comparison because I'm not a cheap $1 whore for jokes. This is one of those powers that looks absurdly powerful given the concept, but actually holds less strength than you may think. Activating it places a point in time that marks where you were at that moment, including your health, shield, ammo, and energy values. Afterwards, a countdown begins, and once it ends or you stop it, you rewind back to that point in time and are given back whatever values you had. And as a little bonus treat, you're able to build up a burst damage effect while the ability's duration is active. Because nowadays, every frame has a little bit of Equinox inside of them, so much so that Genghis Khan feels outdone by her, and if your frame doesn't, then D did it wrong! So this power looks and sounds fucking sweet. But when you peel back the flashy visuals and the fact that you can do this, yeah, it really doesn't do much for you. But first, the good. Now, obviously, its main selling point is that while it's active, you are free to spam your abilities more or less as much as you want, since you're just gonna gain all that energy back anyways once her 4 ends. Then there's the fact that it will also save you from death if you take fatal damage while it's active. It also refunds all of your ammo, and of course, it also has that damage burst at the end. But here's my beef with this power. The rest of her kit already covers a lot of those bases. Seriously, let's start with the burst damage. To be frank, it's really not worth trying to focus on. It's built up by using her slash nades and turrets, but to be honest, you'll probably be doing more damage with those tools alone than what the blast offers you, and you can cover more area with those tools than this fucking bootleg mag bubble. Okay, so what about the fact that it saves you from fatal damage? Well, her shield satellites already do that, like we mentioned before. Make no mistake, the satellites are her main defense tool. Her 4 is just a safeguard. And if you do take fatal damage, Protea hits the no you button and instantly rewinds while also falling flat on her fucking face. So it usually ends up being slower to trigger the death rewind and watch Protea flail around on the ground than to just recast her satellites. Alright, but what about the energy you save? Well, like we talked about earlier, if you have enough strength and you're running things like Energize and Zenuric, it's really not uncommon for the Dispensary to nearly insta-max your energy reserves in mere seconds. And considering how long it can take to empty a primed flow energy tank with her powers, by the time you need to grab another energy orb, you'll probably be re-proccing Energize even with its recent cooldown nerf. And here's a fun fact, you can cancel the Temporal Anchor and not go through the rewind process at the expense of not getting the damage burst or the number returns from rewinding. Essentially, it just means you waste the ability, but I found myself doing this more often than just letting Protea rewind, because if I did let it happen, I tended to lose far more energy. You know what I'm like? I'm like a douchebag that would never rewind their VHS tapes from Blockbuster. What's also fun is that if you happen to rewind into the path of an energy orb, you lose the initial gain from it once Protea grabs it during the rewind. Now, does that technically make sense? Sure. Yeah, sure, it technically makes sense. I mean, me standing on my tippy toes technically makes me taller than 5. It's fucking time travel! It doesn't need to make sense! It really shouldn't do that just based on principle, especially because this is a frame that can make energy orbs very often. And as for Temporal Anchor giving you back health and ammo, Dispensary does that as well. Granted, to a lesser degree, depending on how much you're damaged while within the anchor. Now, mind you, that's not necessarily to say that this is a bad power. It's better to have Temporal Anchor than to not have it, right? And I do still certainly use it to gain back energy. There's no denying that it offers a huge safety net and allows for a ton of ability spam without really having to think. I'm not denying that, I still use this power. I just don't think I use it as often as DE may have anticipated. Protea is odd. I love her kit, yet I hate little things about it at times. She looks incredibly powerful on the surface with her only pussies worry about energy pools attitude, and her ability to spam her tools, not to mention how crazy good her passive looks, but she's a bit slow at matching up to the damage output of other hard-hitting frames. Regarding her passive, I think I smelt a little bit of tomfoolery with it in regards to how her powers scale. So something that struck me was just how underwhelming power strength directly affected her powers. Like, just for an example, you don't get very much extra drop chance from Dispensary with her power strength. For some perspective, with an Umbra build, Kit Gun Arcane, growing power, and her 100% power strength passive increase all stacked together and activated at once, I still could not get 100% double drops with Dispensary. I'd get close, but not to 100%. And all those boosts together easily make over 300% power strength, mind you. And you know, I think that was by design. I feel like it was done on purpose to make sure her passive wasn't too strong. But it's to the point where her passive doesn't feel like an exclusive perk to her that gives her a ton of deeps in a way that's unique. It instead feels like it was put there so that DE could justify making power strength as a whole affect her kit less, if that makes any sense. Like, Grenade Fan needed its damage doubled just to be somewhat decent. The damage burst from her 4 is comparable to an Equinox fart, and the turret needs to get a decent way into its scaling before it starts putting out its serious damage, at which point it'll be close to disappearing. Combine all of that with the fact that her 2 main damage tools require what is essentially a spool up time, and you have a frame whose power is very deceptive on the surface. And I think that's one of the reasons why she doesn't feel as strong as she looks. Frames like Revenant can do percentage-based damage to health pools, to the point where he can one-hit kill enemies with enough strength. Frames like Mirage and Chroma have ridiculous damage modifiers for weaponry, and frames like Mesa have damage in the form of really speedy deeps. Protea, though, feels as if she presents an illusion of insane power without actually being insane. Which, you know what, hey, that's completely fine by me. I don't play this game to min-max my damage efficiency. I leave that shit to the people who have the mental disability of thinking EVE Online is a fun game. But it is something to make a note of if you are that kind of player, because it was definitely something that was throwing me off hardcore when I was messing with her kit. Looking at that giant, flashy 100% strength notification may make you expect a bigger impact, which in turn might sour your perspective of her. In general though, I do think her release was better than that of someone like Vauban's. While she's certainly not the strongest, a frame needs to represent their design concept first and foremost, and she does that with flying colors. Now, with all that out of the way, I need to get back to another video project that has felt like teabagging a cactus. I hope to share it with you soon, but until then, goodbye.